The day they read my mother's will, my aunt laughed in my face and told me to start packing because the house was hers now. She had no idea I'd already seen the document 3 weeks before my mom died. 2 hours after she handed me that eviction notice, she was standing on the porch crying, asking me to please, not do what she knew I could do. Let me back up, because you need to understand how we got there. My name is Eleanor. I'm 29, and for most of my life, it was just me and my mom in a small blue house on Sycamore Street in a town outside Columbus, Ohio. My dad left when I was 4. I don't remember much about him except the sound of the screen door slamming. My mom never remarried, never even really dated. She worked 2 jobs for a long time, a daytime shift at a dental office and weekends at a craft store. And somehow she still made it to every single one of my school plays and softball games. She was the kind of woman who saved twist ties and reused gift bags, who cooked coupons at the kitchen table on Sunday nights with the radio on low. What most people didn't know about my mom was that quietly, over 30 years, she had become careful with money in a way that turned into something bigger. She bought her house outright when I was in middle school. Then she bought the duplex down the street when the old owner passed and his kids wanted a quick sale. Then another rental property 2 towns over. She never bragged. She drove a 15-year-old Honda and wore the same winter coat for a decade. But she owned things, real things, and she paid attention to every dollar. Her younger sister, my aunt, was the opposite. Loud where my mom was quiet. Flashy where my mom was plain. My aunt was always between jobs, always between husbands, always one more loan away from the thing that was finally going to turn her life around. And my grandmother, who lived with my aunt the last few years, never once let me forget that I was, in her words, the daughter of the one who got lucky. Lucky. As if my mom hadn't worked herself half to death. The cancer came fast. By the time the doctors found it, there wasn't much they could do except make her comfortable. Those last months are a blur of hospital parking lots and pharmacy pickups and me sleeping in a chair beside her bed. My aunt visited exactly twice. My grandmother came once, sat for 15 minutes complaining about the drive and left. The day before my mom died, she was barely able to talk, but she squeezed my hand and she said, "It's all taken care of, sweetheart. Don't let them push you around." I didn't fully understand what she meant then. I do now. We buried her on a gray Thursday in October. The kind of October day where the sky looks like wet concrete and the wind goes straight through your coat. I stood at the graveside in a black dress that didn't fit right anymore because I'd lost so much weight that fall, and I held myself together the only way I knew how, which was by not letting myself feel anything at all. My little family was there. My boyfriend, Theo, stood beside me with his hand on my back. And my son, my Oliver, who was 6 years old and was holding a folded paper airplane he'd made because he didn't really understand where his grandma went. Just that we were sad and he wanted to make us feel better. My aunt was there too, of course. So was my grandmother, in a wheelchair now, with that permanent sour expression. So were a handful of cousins I barely knew. The kind of relatives who only show up when there's something to be gained. These stood in a little cluster apart from us, and even at the grave I could feel them watching. Not grieving. Watching. Like they were waiting for something to start. After the service, everyone came back to my mom's house. Our house, I should say, because Oliver and I had moved in 2 years earlier when his dad and I split and I needed help. My mom had loved having us there. She used to say the house finally had the right amount of noise in it. Now it was full of people in dark clothes, balancing little plates of casserole, and the air smelled like coffee and lilies, and I just wanted all of them to leave so I could sit on the floor of her bedroom and cry. Oliver was the one who found the photo. There was a picture of my mom on the side table by the couch. One of my favorites. Her laughing at a barbecue 2 summers ago with sauce on her chin. He climbed up on the couch to look at it, and he picked up the frame because he wanted to hold his grandma, and his little hands were shaking because everything that day was too big for him, and the frame slipped. It hit the corner of the coffee table, and the glass cracked. Not shattered, just a single line across the corner. He froze, his face crumpled. And before I could even get to him, Before I could say, "It's okay, baby, it's just glass," my aunt was across that room in 3 strides, and she grabbed him by the arm and yanked him off the couch and slapped him across the face. I want you to understand that I've never moved so fast in my life. I had Oliver in my arms before the sound even finished. He was screaming, this high, broken sound, his hand pressed to his cheek, and there was already a red mark blooming there in the shape of her fingers. The whole room had gone silent. Everyone was staring. "What is wrong with you?" My voice came out shaking. "He's 6. He's 6 years old, and you put your hands on him." She didn't even look sorry. She straightened her blouse and lifted her chin, and she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "That little brat broke my sister's photo. He's just like his deadbeat father. The whole lot of you are leeches who've been mooching off this family for years." I couldn't breathe. "Mooching? I took care of her. I was here. Where were you?" My grandmother's voice cut in from her wheelchair, dry as paper. "You were here because you had nowhere else to go. Don't pretend you're some saint. You latched onto my daughter like everyone else." And then my aunt delivered the line she'd clearly been holding all day. She walked over to the mantel and she put her hand on it like she owned it, and she said, "Well, none of that matters now. This is my house. My mother's house, by rights, and mine after that. So you can take your little brat and your boyfriend, and you can be out by the end of the week. We're done carrying you." A few of the cousins actually laughed, not loud, just little exhales of amusement, like they were enjoying the show. My grandmother nodded along like a queen approving a sentence, and I stood there in the middle of my mother's living room, on the day we put her in the ground, holding my crying son, being told to get out of the only stable home he'd ever known. Here's the thing they didn't know. 3 weeks before she died, when my mom was still lucid enough to handle her affairs, she had her attorney come to the hospital. I drove him there myself. I sat in the hallway while they talked, and afterward, she had me come in, and she told me everything. The house, the duplex, the rental property, the savings, the brokerage account she'd quietly built over 20 years. All of it had been put in writing. All of it had been left to me and to Oliver in a trust, with me as the executor and the trustee. There was a little money set aside for my grandmother's care because my mom was a better person than her own mother deserved. But the house, the properties, the accounts, everything that mattered was mine. My aunt didn't know that. My grandmother didn't know that. They had spent years assuming, the way some people do, that because my grandmother was the matriarch and my aunt was the loud one, the money would just flow their direction when my mom was gone. They never imagined my quiet, coupon-clipping mother had spent her last clear days locking every door against them. I didn't say any of this. Not yet. I just held Oliver and let her think she'd won. "Fine," I said. That seemed to surprise her. I think she'd expected me to beg, to cry and plead and make a scene she could feel righteous about. Instead, I just shifted Oliver onto my hip, and I pulled my phone out of my pocket, and I made one call. The lawyer's name was Mr. Abernathy. He'd been my mother's attorney for 15 years, and he'd been at the funeral that morning, and he'd told me quietly as he left that if I needed anything at all, he was only 20 minutes away. So I called him, and I said, "I think now would be a good time for you to come back and bring the documents." I hung up. My aunt was watching me with this wary, irritated look. "Who is that?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just carried Oliver into the kitchen, got him a glass of water, sat him at the table, and pressed a cold dish towel gently against his cheek, while the red mark slowly faded. Theo crouched down beside him and started folding a new paper airplane to distract him, his jaw tight with an anger he was keeping leashed for Oliver's sake. Behind us, the living room slowly filled back up with chatter. The cousins refilled their plates. My grandmother demanded someone bring her more coffee. My aunt walked around touching things, opening the hutch where my mom kept the good china, picking up a candlestick and turning it over to look at the bottom like she was already pricing it out. "This is going to need updating," I heard her say to one of the cousins. "The whole place is dated. First thing I'll do is gut this kitchen." I said nothing. I folded paper airplanes with my son. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The mood in the room started to shift the way it does when nothing is happening and people are waiting for a thing they can't name. My aunt got impatient. She came into the kitchen doorway and crossed her arms. "I told you to start packing," she said. "Why are you just sitting there? You think drinking my coffee in my kitchen is going to change anything?" "I'm waiting for someone," I said. "Waiting for who? Your deadbeat ex? You think he's gonna fight me on this?" "Honey, I have rights. I'm her sister. Blood. You're just—" She waved a hand at me, at Oliver, at Theo. "This." Oliver looked up at her, and the fear in his little face nearly broke me, but I just put my hand on his head and said, "Eat your crackers, baby." And then the doorbell rang. I got up and answered it myself. Mr. Abernathy stood on the porch in his gray suit, holding a leather folder, and behind him was a younger man I didn't recognize, in a sport coat, calm and unbothered. I let them in. The whole room turned to look. "Who are these people?" my grandmother demanded. Mr. Abernathy walked to the center of the living room, set his folder on the coffee table, the same table with the cracked picture frame still sitting on it, and he said in the steady voice of a man who has done this many times, "My name is Howard Abernathy. I was the attorney for the late Margaret Whitfield. This is my associate. We're here to clarify some matters regarding her estate, since it seems there may be some confusion." My aunt's face did something complicated. "There's no confusion," she said. "I'm her sister. Everything comes to the family, to my mother and to me." Mr. Abernathy opened the folder. "May I read the relevant portion of the will aloud? It will save us all some time." "Go ahead," my aunt said, lifting her chin again. "Read it." He did. He read it slowly and clearly, the way you read something to people who you suspect are not going to want to hear it. He read that the house on Sycamore Street, the duplex on 4th, and the rental property in Marysville were left in their entirety to the trust established for the benefit of Eleanor Whitfield and her son Oliver. He read that the brokerage account and the savings, the full amount of which made one of the cousins audibly gasp, were left to the same trust. He read that Eleanor Whitfield was named sole executor of the estate and sole trustee. And he read the one short provision that left a modest monthly sum for the care of Margaret's mother, to be administered at the discretion of the trustee. At the discretion of the trustee. Me. The discretion was mine. The room was so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. My aunt's face had gone white, then red. "That's not possible," she said. "That's not— when did she do this? She was sick. She didn't know what she was doing." "Will contest it." The younger man spoke for the first time. "The will was executed 3 weeks before Mrs. Covard. Whitfield's passing witnessed by 2 independent parties and a notary, with a contemporaneous letter from her physician attesting to her sound mind. I have copies here. A contest would not succeed. I'd advise against the expense." "This is a trick," my grandmother said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Margaret would never. She loved this family." "She did," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. I was standing in the kitchen doorway with Oliver's hand in mine. "She loves this family so much that she spent the last clear days of her life making sure you couldn't take everything from her grandson. She knew exactly who you were. She'd known for years." My aunt opened her mouth. I kept going. "She knew you'd been borrowing money from her for a decade and never paying it back. She knew Grandma told everyone I was a freeloader, while my mom paid for Grandma's medications and never said a word. She knew that the second she was gone, you'd come for this house." My voice was steady. I wasn't crying anymore. "She told me the day before she died not to let you push me around, so I'm not going to." I walked to the mantel where my aunt had stood her hand earlier like she owned it. I picked up the cracked photo of my mom laughing with sauce on her chin, and I held it against my chest. "You slapped my son," I said quietly, "in a house that belongs to him. You told me to pack my things and get out of a home that is legally mine. So no, I'm not the one who's leaving." The transformation in that room was something I'll never forget. The cousins set down their plates. The smug little smiles vanished, and my aunt, who 20 minutes earlier had been pricing my mother's candlesticks, came toward me with her hands out, and the words came pouring out of her in a completely different voice. Eleanor, Eleanor, sweetheart, I didn't mean it. I was upset. We all were. It's an emotional day. You know I love that boy. I lost my sister today. I wasn't thinking. Please, we're family. We don't need lawyers. Let's just talk. I looked at her for a long moment. There's nothing to talk about, I said. Mr. Abernathy has copies of the eviction process for the property on 4th, if it comes to that. As for Grandma's care, I'll honor what my mom set up, because she was a better daughter than any of you deserved. But you don't get to stand in my mother's house and call my son garbage and then call me family when the will doesn't go your way. My grandmother started to say something, and I held up my hand, and to my own surprise, she stopped. You can finish your coffee, I said to the room, and then I'd like you all to go. The younger associate quietly opened the front door. One by one, the cousins gathered their coats. My grandmother was wheeled out without another word, though she gave me a look on the way that I think was supposed to wound me and just didn't anymore. My aunt was the last to leave. She stood on the porch in the gray October light, and for a moment all the bluster was gone, and she just looked old and frightened and small. You're really going to do this, she said, to your own family. I thought about my mom clipping coupons at the kitchen table. I thought about her driving that old Honda so her grandson would have a future. I thought about the red mark on my son's cheek. You did this, I said. I'm just the one who's not going to pretend it didn't happen, and I closed the door. The house went quiet then. The right kind of quiet. Theo came and put his arms around both of us. Oliver had stopped crying a while ago and was looking up at me with those big, serious eyes, and he asked, Are they coming back? No, baby, I told him. This is our house. Yours and mine. No one's ever going to make you leave it. I made him grilled cheese for dinner, the way my mom used to, with the crusts cut off, and we ate it on the living room floor in front of the cracked photo, and I let him stay up too late, and I didn't care. The estate took months to fully settle. I'm not going to pretend any of it brought my mom back, or that having the house made the grief any smaller. Some nights I still walk into her bedroom expecting to smell her hand lotion, but Oliver has his own room now with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and there's a college fund with his name on it that my mother quietly started the year he was born, and on Sundays I sit at her kitchen table and pay my bills with the radio on low, just like she did. My aunt sent a card last Christmas. It said she hoped we could put the past behind us for the sake of family. I didn't write back. Some doors you close and you don't open again, and you sleep better for it. They thought my mother was just a quiet woman who saved twist ties and reused gift bags. They never once imagined she was the smartest, strongest person any of them would ever know. They called my son garbage in a house he owned, and they never knew, right up until the moment it was read out loud, that the woman they dismissed her whole life had been 3 steps ahead of them all along. The thing I keep coming back to, all these months later, is that my mother never raised her voice once in her whole life and still ended up holding all the power in that room. My aunt was the loud one. Grandma was the one who ruled by making everyone feel small. And yet when the door finally closed, it was the quiet woman who'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. That's not luck. That's what happens when you spend 30 years paying attention while everyone else is busy performing. What my aunt did at that funeral didn't come out of nowhere. People show you who they are in 1,000 small moments long before the big one. The borrowed money she never paid back, the way Grandma called me a freeloader while my mom quietly covered her medications, the visits that never came when Margaret was dying. Every one of those was a choice. And choices stack up. By the time my aunt put her hand on my son's face, she was just doing out loud what she'd been doing in private for years. The slap wasn't the start of anything. It was the bill coming due. I used to think being a good person meant being nice, meaning never making waves, never being the one who said the hard thing. My mom taught me different, mostly by example. She was kind, but she wasn't soft. She fed grandma's prescriptions for years and still had the clear eyes to see that those same people would come for Oliver the second she was gone. She didn't let her love make her foolish. That's the part I'm still learning. You can have a good heart and a sharp mind at the same time. In fact, you'd better, because there are people who will read your kindness as weakness and treat it like an open door. And here's what nobody tells you about standing your ground. It doesn't feel powerful in the moment. It feels like your hands are shaking and your voice might crack, and every part of you wants to just give in so the discomfort stops. I almost did. When my aunt told me to pack my things, the old instinct was to apologize, to shrink, to keep the peace. What got me through wasn't courage exactly. It was remembering my mom's hand squeezing mine, telling me not to let them push me around. I borrowed her steadiness until I found my own. If there's anything I'd want you to take from what happened in that little blue house on Sycamore Street, it's this. Be the kind of person who keeps her word and pays attention the way Margaret did. Be smart enough to see people clearly, even the ones you're supposed to love, especially them. And when the moment comes that asks you to hold your ground for someone who can't hold it for themselves, be willing to let your hand shake and do it anyway. Oliver sleeps under his glow-in-the-dark stars now because his grandmother was all three of those things at once, and because, on the worst day of my life, I finally figured out how to be them too.